to another Revenue Growth Agency webinar. We are joined today by an unfamiliar face. We have the brilliant Tom Entwistle joining me and Andy today to talk all about building brand performance. So this is going to be very much centered around kind of brand marketing, and we've got some really interesting topics to cover off with you as always. Once again, just to let you know, if you have any questions, pop them in the comments, and if we can't address them while we're live, we'll come back to you once the session is finished. And for those of you that have registered, you'll be all receiving full copies of the session to watch on demand once we're done. We're going to crack straight on today because we've got quite a lot to get through. But Tommy, do you want to just introduce yourself and let our listeners know a little bit about you and your experience?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everybody, Tommy. Before I kind of go into maybe the kind of what's and the how's over the last kind of 2 decades of being predominantly in the outdoor sports industry, I'll kind of touch on the why, really, why it all kind of started, and that all centered around my connection and love with the outdoors. Introduced to that really kind of not by choice, just by location, where I lived when I was younger, and that was in the hills, really, in its basic sense. I had no real choice other than spending quite a bit of time with on my own. And but a kind of pivotal thing that really affected my trajectory in my career and also in my life was being introduced to the mountains by my grandparents. They lived in North Wales. They were both kind of walkers, and like my grandfather was a kind of climber, mountaineer, and that kind of early introduction was really monumental and remained in my heart. So as I kind of progressed through my kind of late teens, did a lot of mountaineering, started martial arts, which actually, funnily enough, complemented each other, especially boxing. I was made redundant actually when I was around 21 from an engineering firm, and I had a choice at that point. I wanted to do something that really mattered and really kind of gave me fulfillment, connection to traveling, the outdoors, climbing if I could. I thought about the military. And also at that point, there was a new Snow and Rock. Some people will be familiar with that retailer. It's a high-end premium retailer opening a flagship store in Didsbury on the Princess Parkway heading into Manchester. So I'll cut a long story short. So I actually went for that job, got the job. The first person I met as I walked up the stairs, it was all super shiny, new shop, beautiful shop. Ended up being my wife, still my wife today. A Snow and Rock couple. Some lasted, some didn't. And then, was able to really kind of fully immerse myself in the product. Lots of different product from one season to the next, meaning kind of the summer season and then a winter season, which kind of turned predominantly into ski and snowboard. Then I went and spent about 8 months in New Zealand. Then came back, worked at Snow Rock in Sheffield, the ski centre. And then moved down south, actually. My wife's originally from London. And then actually during a new kind of role as trainer for Snow Rock, a national trainer, I met the founder and managing director of Osprey Europe. So they'd brought Osprey into Europe from the mother company based in Colorado. That was in 2007. And then I spent nearly 16 years at Osprey, helping to take them alongside a very talented and passionate team into the forefront of design and channel, I guess, domination in some ways. So it went from who's Osprey really to where they are. And then in recent years, I decided to move away from Osprey into Thrudark, which has been an incredible journey. I've since moved away from Thrudark, which was a collaborative decision alongside the founders who've been incredibly supportive, to new journeys, and can't go much into that. It's a little bit of a secret at the moment, but very much looking forward to the next step.
Amazing.
That's great, and such a kind of breadth of experience within one kind of niche industry. You've kind of covered so many different touch points within those businesses. To kind of dive in, I guess, to some of the queries that we hear from clients or that we read about and we experience. and hopefully something that you're able to provide some insight on. The retail landscape is incredibly competitive, as we all know, and even within, if we took outdoors or kind of travel or sport as a specific industry, increasingly competitive, and we see loads of new brands coming out of the gate with kind of either niche products, or you've got the likes of your on runnings and your hokers coming in and trying to dominate very specific areas. What is your experience in terms of comparing brand against comparing product, and as a consumer, how kind of they're making decisions on what to purchase based on like very specific product details against like what the brand is saying and the story? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I think the key to this part is really my experience. It's my personal experience. It's a point of view gained from that. There's, it's not the magic kind of bullet in terms of what will work for everybody. Just to caveat what I'm just about to say, but that's really from my point of view. The differences now between brands and product. There's a lot of brands out there. Some are massive brands who've had a lot of heritage in terms of their consistency across brand messaging, take a Patagonia, for example. And there's a lot of new brands emerging, as you mentioned, from social platforms or from, different areas of different categories. And there's a hell of a lot of product out there, and in terms of understanding the differences between product, the manufacturing processes in lots of ways are very similar. And sometimes a lot of products are built in the same factories. They're just slightly tweaked for proprietary reasons, be that fabrics or components. But I think really understanding the key differences between brand.
Oh, he's gone.
We seem to have lost him. Just while we wait for Tommy to come back, Andy, do you have any views on that same topic? I know that we speak to our clients a lot about differentiation, and if your competitors have a very similar product, how you can go about making yourself different. Let's get your opinion on that.
It's more of an observation, really, because obviously Tommy's been on the sort of client side of that question. We're on the agency side, and I've been on the agency side pretty much all of my sort of 20-odd years in the e-com world. So it's more of an observation. What seems to have happened is years and years ago, there would be a business would start with the brand, and it would start with, right, this is who we are. Then they would design a product. So it'd either start with the product, then a brand would come from that, or they'd start with the brand and a product would come from that. Well, there's been a switch more recently, and if you look at the likes of, Mr. Beast, for example, you can see what age my children are, can't you? Mr. Beast has started with building an audience. So what typically happens is you have a product and a brand, and then you build your audience. What's happening now is that you build your audience, and what seems to happen is that organically your brand, and therefore, who you are and what your values are, emerge from the audience almost. And then all you need to do is put a product in front of them, and all of a sudden, you've got a top-selling product. Same as candy kittens. So the chap from Made in Chelsea had a huge following from the show, national television show, then decided to put together a sweet brand, Candy Kittens, got it to a position where actually he had a pop-up shop that actually wasn't, and there were no products to sell in it, but people were queuing up outside, and they had this shop that we were selling, in theory, sweets, Candy Kittens, but they couldn't get the product to market quick enough. But they had the audience quick enough. So we had people queuing down the street, trying to get into the shop to buy what they had in the shop was your stationery. It was the quickest thing that they could get, was a Candy Kitten pencil case and a Candy Kitten piece of paper. And people bought them because the audience came first. So it's just more of an observation of brand and product and audience, and how that seems to have switched. Two examples that we given with Candy Kitten and Mr. Beast.
Welcome back.
Back. Typical.
It's all, I know it happens to the best of us, so don't worry about that. Do we want to pick up where we left off?
Just as I was about to as well. Convenient timing, anyway. So what I was getting to, and I'll do it a bit quickly just in case it happens again, which will be very annoying, is the key messaging and the key point of view of brands who have, multiple products and, differences between their competitors, but ultimately their point of view and the point of difference from a messaging perspective. And I think from a brilliant basic perspective, and we were talking about it, it's understanding what really is that cut through. And in the face of factual, kind of functional products, you can't argue against the fact that a product has a certain fabric or has a certain function. But understanding the cut through from an emotional perspective is super important, and especially as the demographic audiences are changing, and their I guess stickiness is attached to certain areas of your point of view, be that your sense of humor, be that your position on the planet, or whatever that is. So I truly believe that having emotional cut through nowadays is as important. Again, I'm not going to say something is right or wrong or more important than the other, than product functionality, and the true fact of this is what it is. I think really from owning that kind of emotive marketing and what effect that has on the audience is a little bit like, sorry, I'll apologise to anybody watching this because I'm full of bad analogies, so you'll have to just roll.
We love them, don't worry.
No, I'm full of them. So a little bit like what is a theatre without the play and without the people within it? What was the Colosseum without the gladiators and the stories that they built around the gladiators?
Yeah.
Some of which were actually completely not true. Some of these kind of gladiatorial kind of events were just mass marketing exercises, really, to bring that community together, and to put on a show. That's what it was. So, in terms of understanding that those emotions bring people together, and I definitely think nowadays that having that sense of humor is a really important cut through, because I think a sense of humor is quite a key insight to individually somebody's personality, and that kind of honest ability to kind of show that not vulnerability, because I don't think sense of humor is a vulnerability, but just those kind of inner workings of how you tick. And I think from looking at brand messaging and brand marketing, that's really important to give that to the community, because then there's less barriers of kind of entry there when you open your books, really, from an emotional perspective. So I think that's a really kind of key differentiator between the product brand marketing sphere, and which brands are having that kind of cut through.
Yeah, and I think interestingly there, and I've spoken about this before, from a messaging perspective, in terms of what the results are if you're telling a story versus if you're listing product specs. And I know that the Stanford School of Business did loads of research in terms of memory and how we're able to retain stories better than we're able to retain facts. So actually, if you're looking at how effective your ads can be, you're better off telling a story that's got an emotional through line than you are just listing the different specifications or features of a product. So I think if you couple that research, which isn't inherently about marketing, but it still links to us as human beings, and actually take that forward and think about your brand, that can help you then kind of craft this story that is then going to be more powerful for you than just listing the fabrics or, the how it's manufactured, or, how long it's going to last and things like that.
It's like if you look at brands like Rafa as well. Rafa did fantastic well, and also Gymshark to a certain degree. They did fantastic well by building a community and setting the foundations of values that community stand for, and then getting that out there. Same as Rafa. So they built the racing club, which is essentially just a club where people have bought stuff, get invited to, and there's loads of ride outs across the country. Same as Gymshark, I've built their local centres. There's lots of examples of where you can apply some personality to a brand that works really well. I mentioned when you're off before, products that build at the start with an audience. So Mr. Beast and Candy Kitten, both of those two brands started with actually the audience first.
Yeah.
And then you just put a product in front of them. So Mr. Beast just put some chocolates in front of them. It's got nothing to do with the channel, really. He just went, there you go, there's some chocolate to my audience. And they bought in the millions because they're not buying the chocolate. And actually, my son loves the chocolate. The chocolate's terrible. It's the worst chocolate you'll ever taste. But he's outsells some of the top chocolatiers in the world because of his audience. His audience believe him, they like him, they follow him, they engage with him. And they think that by buying a chocolate bar that's got Mr. Beast's Feastables on it, that they're buying somehow, further into his theory.
Yeah, and I think that point that you just mentioned there before, from a younger audience perspective, I'm always like blown away just doing, those quizzes online with my kids. My kids are 13, 12 and 8. And the amount of brands that they know, some of them are like super obscure, but it's not the fact that they know the brand, but that is kind of it does shock me how good they are sometimes. It's why they know the brand and what actually they know the brand for, and a lot of the time it's those kind of emotional kind of boxes that is kind of ticked. Whether it's kind of crazy really when you look at a well-known kind of razor company. We're all right talking about certain brands like think of Gillette and the amount of people who know the Gillette song, or think of different things like that. Enzo Ferrari said we don't sell supercars, we sell dreams, and all of those kind of emotional attachments to brands. You get in, not that I own a Ferrari, but you get in a Ferrari and the thing that sells that Ferrari is how it makes you feel. Correct. So it's those kind of brands who can tap into that kind of that feeling and that attachment, that is then really everlasting, and people won't really ever forget that. Look at football teams, and again, just talking about my kids, they're buying into certain football teams. They're not buying a Manchester City jersey necessarily because it's Man City, in my opinion. They're buying it because of the theory around it, the people within it, the stories that it's kind of projecting. And I would definitely say that when brands and businesses get into certain parts of the kind of life cycle, understanding that growth and scalability and all of those things that a brand and a company wants, that's just kind of, especially, ambitious people within those brands. There's nothing wrong with that. With that obviously brings complexity, which sometimes it's intended, sometimes it's unintended. But then kind of forgetting those kind of brilliant basics of what that connection with the audience and the community and that messaging really transmits, and those kind of two things that fight against each other at any one time, and that is a transformative journey in a brand cycle. What are those things that really push the transformation through? And also at the side of it, there's the raw reality that you need transactional parts to that mechanism as well, the commercial transactions. But finding people, and I was very lucky, I spent 12 years with the managing director, Rob, at Osprey Europe, understanding that sometimes those transactional feedbacks, putting a coin in the slot machine and, something coming out the bottom, there's different slot machines, and some of the transformative machines, you put your coin in and nothing comes out, but you know that at some point that was the right thing to do because it's building that long-term brand equity. And I think that's always a really important thing when people are starting brands or building, scaling businesses, is to understand some slot machines you put a pound in and you'll get something out. Some you don't. And that's not a bad thing if you're doing it for the right reasons with the right values to achieve the right thing. And I think that's an important part when you see a lot of brands, a lot of performance marketing going on, where it once it kind of slides too transactional and less so transformative, the long-term journey of that brand and the legacy that you're building there is sometimes a little bit lost. And I think it's just like life, really. It's annoying, trying to find that balance in life. Many of us try to find that throughout our years and never truly succeed. And it's the same in business and brand. It's just about finding that right balance and not forgetting those brilliant basics that mean something to you as a brand, but also mean something to the community.
Yeah, Andy, isn't it one of our favourite things to talk about in terms of longevity and getting the long-term stuff right? We see all the time people wanting kind of silver bullets for revenue and they want everything yesterday. But actually, what can be the most powerful sometimes is, you can't build a house on sand. So laying all of those really strong foundations, which you're not going to reap the rewards straight away, but 6, 12 months, 2 years down the line, you're going to be able to scale much more effectively, and you're going to have built a community that you're able to then kind of take to the next level. Andy, I don't know if you've got any comments on that particular thread.
Well, yeah, we call it performance branding. So there's an element, which is what you touched on, Tommy. There's an element of performance marketing that's in there for sure. That's the net, that needs to capture the in-market audience. And then there's the branding side of it, which is all about that. Let's have a look at those slot machines you talk about and work out, do some research. We do lots of client questionnaires. We do lots of data point analysis to work out who's our audience, where do they hang around, what's the media consumption, so that we can identify as best we can which of those slot machines are going to give us the best possible return. But what we mean by return, we mean progress in terms of that, moving that brand story on, moving that brand message on. What we know is if we get those slot machines right, that the net, the performance marketing is casting becomes wider and wider and wider. So it feeds the performance marketing. So because we talk about these glass ceilings all the time, don't we, Daniel, in our sort of everyday life, where we'll look at a brand, and some of these brands we're talking to a minute on massive global brands, and they're still in the sort of performance marketing trap. We look in the Meta account, for example, and they've got a product carousel as an ad, and in there's just product, and it's kind of like if you are targeting new customers to grow, which is what you should be doing, getting your brand story out there and telling them all about your personality and why you exist as a brand and what the story is that you want to engage them with. They're not interested in seeing a product at this stage. They want to know why. Why do you exist? They want to know, how the products are made. Is it handmade somewhere? If it is, that's great. Is it sustainable? Something that Patagonia have done really well over the years is they've got this huge following based on their whole global outlook, their sort of sustainability and what they stand for and the ethics as a brand. That's where you want to get in front of customers to grow, not just putting 5,000 product carousels in front of people. Although they have the function, it's not going to get you past that grass ceiling.
It's the moderation thing. I won't bore you or everybody else with my support of kind of stoicism, so that's maybe enough for another time, but that kind of moderation and that balance really is what I was trying to kind of lean into, and it's, yes, you should listen to your consumers and your customers and your community, but also at the same time, they don't know everything in terms of what you could do or should do as a business, and so sometimes you've got to put your own kind of stamp on what you think you should do. To your point, performance branding versus performance marketing, that kind of moderation in play. And we used to say something that was quite kind of fundamental in terms of how we used to look at success and kind of results, which is success is a byproduct of doing everything well. And that comes back down to the moderation. So it's looking at the brand, the sales, the operations, the finances, everything, and doing everything well. And that comes back to, Danielle, your point. There is no kind of silver bullet. You can't literally get, stand in front of one slot machine as a brand, put a pound in, and everything works. It is literally a collection and moderation of how you balance things. And there's a time and a place for everything. But again, just to step back to my point around brilliant basics, as you grow as a business, it's understanding those basics across product, people, and process, understanding that across the values and how you message that and your clear point of view, and having that emotion, and also sometimes that I guess that courage to show that emotion. That was my point before around the vulnerability point, having the courage to show your emotional side as a brand, and also the people within that brand, and I believe that a lot of the time that once you've done that connection and engagement with your audience, existing and or new, is not easier, but it is a smoother journey because you've broken down those kind of emotional barriers.
Yeah, and I think it's something kind of without tooting your horn, it's something that Thrudark did really well. I still am a big fan of a lot of the video creative that you at the time when you were there that you were kind of pumping out in terms of kind of adventure, but there being kind of elements of risk involved, and kind of how the brand ambassadors that you were using were able to overcome adversity and kind of break through all of these barriers. And it was really powerful from an emotional point of view, regardless of you being able to sell a product. And I think that's what I love about marketing, and I'm very much an advocate for, not just having collection and carousel ads pushing products. I'm very much sit kind of at the top in terms of, making it a story and making it emotional, and that's kind of the advertising that I connect to. I would love to know a little bit more, I guess, about how, in your role in these businesses, how you're able to kind of pitch these big ideas, and is it difficult for you to be able to get kind of approval for those kinds of things, or like how does that work?
Okay, so completely honestly, and going back to the silver bullet, there's no silver bullet in terms of how, but also there's no silver bullet, or there shouldn't really be a silver bullet in terms of the who, and I mean specifically who that comes from. So I'll answer it very simply, and especially from a Thrudark perspective. The endeavour through adversity is an emotional, real, transferable, wide spanning message, and that is very, very true, not just for the people outside of that business, but also inside the business, and the walking the walk there. I would definitely say that I individually played a part, but I was definitely not in any way the main jigsaw puzzle. The main jigsaw piece in that puzzle. An incredibly passionate, talented, kind of ingrained set of people within that business, all the way from the founders, Stas and Louis, across the whole business, across content, branding, the customer communications team. And that's my point around success, is all of those kind of players on the pitch pulling together, showing up for training, showing up, for every single game. That really is what the byproduct of the messaging you saw, the emotions, the content, the adventurous feel, the sense of humor, and that was very, very collective. But the founders, Stas and Louis, were fundamental pioneers and kind of leaders in that existence, and those kind of retaining the values, retaining those emotional connections with people, being real, essentially, and that's, I think that I've used that with different people I've worked with over the years, is the realness, like a real brand or a true brand. And I think that is also another difference in the market. Which brands are real? Which brands have people within them who are real, doing what they say they do. Kind of, again, a little bit of a comment. We don't just stand by the product; we stand in the product. All of those really kind of key parts, again, that people buy into, because these are real people doing real things. They have a real brand. It means something. And again, that was very much the case, that we tried as teams to push that through in Thrudark and also in Osprey. Again, not just sat behind a laptop firing CRM emails out to everybody and hoping, the people within it were living and breathing the brand every single day.
Andy, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so. I think it's your experience it comes across really well. I think the challenge with some smaller brands is, where do they start? And I think in larger brands, particularly like Osprey, you've got lots and lots of different people that get around a big table and you can bounce ideas off. I think less so in Thrudark. It was a smaller business than Osprey, certainly when you joined. But I think one thing for the listeners, really more than anything else, is just make a start. It's just take that first step in towards the sort of storytelling angle of who you are. It doesn't need to be cinematic quality. It doesn't need to be anything that is going to get you to the Cannes Lion Awards. You know, it doesn't need to be that. It just needs to be authentic, honest. It needs to come from a place where, you know, you can start something from that is tied into your values as a business. And just take that first step. Just create a small video, edit a small video together from some back sort of scenes. So lots of the videos that we create, or Danielle creates rather, are, you know, just people making the product, you know, and that really connects between somebody buying this faceless bag, for example, or faceless pair of sandals or shoes, to seeing somebody hand stitching something. There's a connection there when you do something very simple and basic like that. And if that starts to tell your brand story, then start with that. Start with something very basic. It doesn't need to be where you end up on the journey with telling your brand story. Just start somewhere, and you'll reap the rewards from doing that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Fab. Well, what amazing timing, because we've just hit 30 minutes.
So look, we're experts.
I know, it's like we've done this before. Tommy, it's been so interesting to listen to your experience and your point of view on kind of what brands should be doing. Obviously, we've seen success in both of the brands that you've kind of been a part of, so that's been really inspiring to see. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to everyone for tuning in to watch. As I mentioned before, we'll be sending this out to everyone that registered. And any last parting words before we go from either Andy or you, Tommy?
Any bombshells? Not really. To Andy's point, anybody looking at starting a brand, go for it, and have fun along the way. I would say don't kind of fall into the trap of having to swing your legs out of bed because you have to. Get into a position where you're swinging your legs out of bed because you want to, and you're working towards that vision. So yeah, go for it. Now is a great time to do that. Put your vision together and head off on that journey.
Amazing. What a way to finish. Thanks everyone for watching, and we will see you next time.
Thanks everybody.
Bye,
Cheers,
everyone.
Daniel. Thanks, Andy.
Bye.